Okay. Good evening, Tando Channel Book Club lovers. We are so happy to have you here with us for another interview with an amazing African female storyteller. As you know, we start each session with a quote from another African female storyteller. And today I've chosen one of our favorites here on the book club, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And her quote is simple and to the point. And it goes like this: culture does not make people, people make culture. And of course, she's quoting a widely celebrated statement in the public domain, so we can't really say it's from her, but it is from something that she said. And today we have with us in the studio Norah Mumba, author of A Song in the Night, a personal account of widowhood in Zambia, Lusaka, and author of the recently released novel, Knitted in Silence. Welcome, Norah. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm glad to be here with you and with your guests.
Well, we're glad
to have inviting me.
We're glad to have you. So for those of you who are not au fait with Norah and her body of work, it is very broad, it is very deep, and very impactful in her country and for many women, such as herself, from all walks of life. Among her published works are A Song in the Night, a personal account of widowhood in Zambia. It is a memoir, and that was published in 1992. Later on, The Birthday Party in African Radio Plays, Baden Baden Nomus Deutsch Well, 1991, Grey Grey Mountain in Warm and River of Dreams, Owing Mills, USA, the National Library of Poetry, 1994, The Heart of a Woman and Other Stories in the Heart of a Woman, an anthology of Zambian stories, Lusaka, Zawa, which she was instrumental in co-founding, and at the bottom of the food chain in Women and Activists, Harare ZIBF 2000, The Fire Next Time and Nobody Ever Said AIDS, Cape Town Kwela Books, Ruminations, a newspaper column in the National Mirror, Lomhlahla, Daughter of a Warriors, a play written and performed in commemoration of the eclipse of the sun in 2001. And that's just a dip in the ocean of Norah's wide-ranging literary work. She's widely celebrated for her contribution to the promotion of literary arts in Zambia. In 2017, she earned a place in an exhibition honoring great names in the Zambian literary landscape, featuring literary giants such as Kenneth Kaunda, Namwali Sapal, Benoel Sinyangwe, Andrew Sardinis, Vijay Mwanga, John Mwana Katwe, Dominic Malaisho, Dambisa Moyo, and Ellen Banda Alku. So Norah, how did you get into writing, especially when your day-to-day bread and butter was in the work of being a librarian?
I guess you could say that anyone who is handling books is bound to get infected at some point or other. But truth be told, I was always interested in writing. Even during my school days, my schoolmates would testify to that. My friends from secondary school, Roma Girls Secondary School, when we are reminiscing about our student days, they remember me always having this interest in telling stories. When I was at school, my career dream was being a journalist. I don't know why I thought it would be fun to be a journalist, because then you are handling stories and you are writing. But then when I qualified to go to the University of Zambia, I got there and journalism was not on offer during our time. So the closest I could get to books and writing was librarianship. And everybody was shocked because very few people chose librarianship as a career. But I actually applied to be a librarian. And it became, I was like a fish in water. I enjoyed handling books and, having a relationship, not just in the management of books and information, but also having that personal relationship with the content of the books. So while I was working as a librarian, in my own time, I was plodding around with words. So it was not surprising that I found myself at a point where I wrote my book, A Song in the Night. Do you want me to talk about The Song in the Night?
Yes, please, Norah. I think we'd be interested to know about the book that changed it all, because A Song in the Night isn't just a memoir. It actually became a platform, a conversation starter, and a trigger and instigator for you campaigning to the enactment or for the enactment of the Interstate Succession Act number 5 of 1989. Alongside the Wills and Administration of Estates Act number 6 of 1989. And these were bills, or rather legislations, that had been almost shelved until you began your personal journey in widowhood, and took that out into the public domain. And initially it was cathartic, and then it just spearheaded this whole thing, which changed the trajectory of widows and other families like yours in Zambia since then. So tell us how A Song in the Night came to be, how you wrote it, and then the activism journey that began from that place.
A Song in the Night, I like to describe it as a book which I didn't write. It's a book which wrote itself. It wrote itself in the sense that obviously, even in the times when I would dream of writing and getting published and so on, I never imagined that I would be writing a book about widowhood. Nobody imagines that they will be widowed. So when this happened to me, it was such a deep experience that I was failing to cope. I was failing to manage my grieving. And the only way I could manage it was to put it down on paper. And so every evening after, I'd done with putting the children to bed and preparing them for the next day and so on and so forth, I would then sit in my bed with pen and paper, and I was writing this by hand. I had no access to a computer. There were no computers even that time. I had no access to a computer, so it was a real pen and paper, and I just started with the first word, and the rest just started flowing. And when I put the last full stop to it, I took a walk to a publishing house, and I said, no, I brought this. I don't know if you'd like it. And the gentleman who received me took it and started reading. And the interesting thing is that he actually forgot that I was in the room. He got so engrossed in reading, he forgot I was there. After a while, I had to ask, oh, can I go? Can I leave it? Or should I take it with me? And he looked a bit startled and said, no, please leave. We shall get in touch with you. And even as I was walking out, he was busy reading. And the next time they got in touch, they said, we are publishing this. This is exactly what this country needs at this point in time. Because at that time, there had been so much effort by the women's movement. I was aware of it, but I was not active in it because really it had nothing to do with me before I was a widow. So my publishers started to use the material in the book for a major campaign. And I was the person in the front of that campaign. I got invitations to speak to the media. I spoke to various individuals. I spoke at various meetings. But the major one of those was the one where I got to address the head of state, our now late President Kaunda, at a public meeting. I addressed him personally, and I talked about how women were suffering because they did not have this legislation to protect them. And he made a commitment that at the next sitting of parliament, he would personally make sure that that bill was passed, and that is how that bill was passed. Of course, a lot more happened in between that, but the gist of it is that when Parliament sat the next time, everybody said, oh, that's Norah Mumba bill. It has to pass. The president will not leave us alone. And it was finally passed, and it was a major, major relief for the women folk. And it became, I believe, even across our borders, people spoke about how it is possible to have this kind of legislation to protect women, because really it was a very sad story for widows back then. I believe even now, there are people who are not even aware of the law, but fortunately, there are those who are able to intervene and encourage them to use this piece of legislation and get at least some legal protection. So for me, that was a very big achievement. But of course, it was about me finding an outlet for my grief. I needed that. I was failing to cope. So I literally just cried on paper with a pen and paper, and I cried and I cried. And I came out alive, victorious. So I'm a survivor, and I'm very glad about that.
Yeah, definitely a survivor, but also a warrior, a woman warrior for so many other women such as yourself. It's interesting to me the role that grief plays in terms of family. I think often sometimes we think family is a place of life and love, and it is. But sometimes that life and love we experience in family is most emphasized during times of grief, because it's not something you just quickly pick yourself up from and go and move on. And for you at that time, you had your children to raise, which you've done successfully, and now you have a brood of grandchildren with you. And you had your career, and you also had this dream to write, which you continued doing. And one of the things you then went on to do was to co-found Zambia Association of Women Writers, and began that process in terms of nurturing other women writers. Can you tell us a little bit about why that is so important, especially from the perspective of a Black African female author?
Oh, truth be told, women go through a lot in this life. The scales are tipped in favor of men, and women have to put up with so much pain. I don't think that I've met a woman who does not have a tale of pain behind her. And so whenever you talked to women, they had all these stories to tell, but they just needed a way of bringing it all out. Because I worked at the University of Zambia, I was in contact with friends in the Department of Literature and Languages. And the head of the Department of Literature and Languages at that time, a friend called Wendo Mulengela, approached me and said, it is possible that you can be instrumental in creating a body of women writers. So we talked around that subject, and the department organized a colloquium for women writers, and women came from all over the country, literally. They came from all over the country, and it was a tale of all this, all that, all this, And at the end, the resolution was, we must have a Women Writers Association. who can tell the tale of women, get a place, establish a place for women at the table, because women were not at the table. The table had men. If you look at our political scenario, the entire leadership were men. Up to now, it mostly is. But back then, the entire cabinet was men only. So the issues were great. The pains were great. So I was charged with the responsibility of organizing to make sure that we establish this Women Writers Association. So again, I sat in my bedroom at night, writing writing a constitution and other instruments needed to set up an organization. We registered ourselves with the Registrar of Societies, and then we went all out now to get a membership and to encourage people that had a story to tell. Please put it on paper, and we shall see about publishing. The Zambia Women Writers Association started off by publishing a book called The Heart of a Woman, a collection of short stories. I contributed some stories. In fact, the title, The Heart of a Woman, is a story that I contributed. But what was interesting about that anthology is that we did not ask people to write on any particular theme. It was free for all. I should mention also that some male contributors to the book. And everybody, it was like they were sitting in one room and talking about this, because they all wrote about the abuse of women and how women are shortchanged here. You cannot own property. Some of us, even going to the bank, you had to go with your identity card if you're married, because they didn't recognize, the system did not recognize women. You had to have a man behind you, that sort of thing. It was just unacceptable. To cut a long story short, Zambia Women Writers Association was born. We started to organize writing courses for people, and we realized that Women Writers Association cannot address gender issues by talking to women only. If you feel that you are the one with the problem, don't talk to yourself. Involve the people that you believe are part of the problem. So the association had members, both male and female. To this day, the Zambia Women Writers Association has male members and female members. At some point, we had problems. Some people thought that we should change the name and just say Zambia Writers Association. I said, no, but our goal is to address gender issues. So we keep the name and we keep the goal. But we have no problem with men being members of our association. And today it is thriving, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of that.
I think it's definitely something to be proud of. I know that one of the heart cries for you and other founders for the Women's Zambian Women's Writers Association was also around not just getting women to write, but also to be published. As you said, you can't just talk about the problem amongst yourselves or to yourself, but you've got to get that out there. Tell us a little bit about the journey of publishing and the importance of publishing, especially for African women in Zambia, from your experiences in this pivotal role in the industry.
I'm so glad you asked. It's been a very rough road, or should I say it is still a very rough road. We engaged our colleagues in the publishing industry, in the entire book industry. We have in Zambia an association called the Booksellers and the Publishers Association of Zambia, which basically brings together publishers and booksellers. So we opened conversation with the publishers. We said, look, we write, but in order for us to be recognized as writers, we need to be published. And there's been this talk about Zambia being a literary desert, which I really don't believe that Zambia is. People do write, but they are not published. So our publisher friends were honest enough to tell us that, look, publishing is a business. We do it to make money. And so in considering whether to publish a work, we have to ask ourselves, is this work going to sell? And their conclusion, right or wrong, their conclusion was that there was no readership in Zambia. In fact, up to now, the song is, oh, there's no reading culture in Zambia. And then you ask yourself, but how are people getting educated if there's no reading culture in Zambia? So it is not true, but no, theirs is the commercial consideration. That's how come Zambia women writers decided to also get into publishing. But up to now, that is the major cry. We have friends who write poetry, very good poetry, and publishers just told us outright they will not publish poetry because how many people do you know who buy a book of poetry? I said, look, you create the hunger for something and the market will be there. But if you do not, if there's no, there are no poetry books on the market, how will the hunger arise? So this is a conversation we've been having over and over. And I can say to this day that it is not a very good picture. It is still a very unhappy picture. We have a few publishers, yes, but they want to make money. So in making money, what they have decided to do is that they will only publish school textbooks. Why? Because the Ministry of Education will buy the textbooks. They need to buy textbooks for schools, textbook of geography, textbook of history, textbook of mathematics, and all that. So as a result, our children, as they are being raised in schools, all they ever get access to are textbooks. So we are trying now to establish a relationship with the system to encourage literary works. These children need to read other works apart from their textbooks. They need to read literary works. So we've been in conversation with the curriculum developers for the schools, and they are warming up. They are warming up to the subject. Hopefully, we shall get somewhere very soon. Now, one result of that, I should mention, is that because writers are writing and there are no publishers, they will not just throw away their work. I know that I have done that. I'm guilty of that. No, because I can't publish this work, so I just put it away and say, forget about it. So what I've seen many writers do now is that they publish themselves. In the beginning, I was skeptical about that. Being a librarian and all that, I was very skeptical about somebody writing and publishing themselves. So I had no kind words. But now I realize, in the environment that we are in, that it really is necessary. The only thing is we encourage people who are going to publish themselves to please make sure that the quality of their works has been vetted by professionals. You give your manuscripts to people who can give you some very honest assessments, and also make sure that you have passed it through the editorial and proofreading process, which basically is what publishers do. So if Zambian literature is not visible on the world market, you know who to blame. It's our publishers who are not making enough effort. But I'm glad about the people that are now publishing themselves. Who knows, one day, everybody who is self-publishing will get together and say, hey, let's form a conglomerate and become publishers ourselves. And this is how progress comes about. We cannot remain, if publishers want to remain in the 20th century, we will leave them there. Wow, how the writers move into the 21st century. This is just fact. This is how we are moving.
100%. I think it's interesting, though, you mentioned that because of the strong business need, the focus is on education. But like you rightly pointed out, education is part of a reading culture. But education is actually strengthened by cultivating a literary reading culture. Because if we never learn to read for pleasure, and if we never learn to read as art, then it's also difficult to learn to read to learn. And it's a mutually reinforcing cycle. But interesting that you've turned the conversation towards self-publishing, because that brings me to my next question, which is A Song in the Night was published around 1992, but a lot of people don't realize that that was quite a lengthy process for you, a 5-year process for you. And you know, you've written many works of short form, either in theater or short story fiction since then. And then 30 years later, in 2022, you have now released your second long form piece of work in your career, which is Knitted in Silence, right? And that's been recently produced, and you've done that self-publishing. Tell us, first of all, why the 30-year gap? And then what the process was like for you this time? Because when I compare the story of A Song in the Night, that's kind of like a writer's dream. You go into a publishing house, you put your manuscript down on the table, and immediately there's a reception that is captivated, that is willing, that is responsive. And many people don't get that. And you yourself have talked about how that is for many other literary writers. But this time around, with all of your experience nurturing other writers, 30 years later, you're like, I'm going to self-publish. But why only 30 years later do we get a book from Norah?
I suppose because it was knitted intricately. Well, to tell the truth, I was writing, and I would start a piece of work and shelve it. I'll start another piece of work and shelve it, start another one and shelve it. The reason being that I had a mental block. I've had a lifetime mental block where, for me, life story does not end happily. For me, you can do everything that you can, but in the end, you are met by sorrow, because that's my life story. So I had to tell myself, surely life cannot just be sorrow, no? Because even with the pieces of work that I did, in the end, somebody died. So I said to myself, this dying has to finish at some point. You cannot kill the whole world. And so I had to work on myself, to just give myself some psychosocial counseling and put life first, because there is life, you know, and life can be happy, and it is happy. And just because something happened in one's life, that should not determine what the future is. You know, as they say, your present is not the story of your future. So it took me a long time to get that worked out. It was so bad that even in pictures, like if I pose for a picture, people would always say, "Why do you look so sad?" And I didn't even realize that I look sad. So I got to a point where I told myself, I'm alive and I must be happy, enjoy life. I'm raising children, they must be happy. Now I have all these grandchildren, they must have a happy grandmother. You know? So having made that resolution, when I write something now, even shorter pieces, the ending is better. And that for me is beautiful. That's how life should be lived. And I particularly speak to women, because of all the abuse. Every time you pick up a newspaper, or you switch on the radio, the television, the stories of what happens to women are always just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. So it's important that we change this narrative. I have reached that point where I told myself the narrative must change for women, because now in my writing, it's no longer about Norah. It's about all women out there, all the daughters, all the nieces, all the granddaughters. We must make life brighter for all the women that are coming behind us. And this is the lifetime quest. And I believe we are getting there. I can even smile now. I never used to be able to smile. I'm able to laugh. When I write, because as you mentioned, I'm also a playwright. When I write plays, I enjoy building, the happy characters. They can tackle the sadder aspects of life, but they must come out victorious and happy in the end. So women must be victorious, and they will be victorious.
It's interesting to me that you say that, because I can definitely see kind of like a juxtaposition or a parallel from A Song in the Night with this one, with Knitted in Silence. And for those of you who are curious to know about the book Knitted in Silence, this is what it is. After her mother's untimely death, Luame's life is plunged into danger at the hands of a man who is supposed to be her guardian. During this time of perilous struggle, she comes into an unusual gift which grows with her. Later in life, conflict comes from a different source, another person close to her. When Luame finds love, she comes to the realization that she must put her past to rest in order to walk into her future. The story is set in semi-rural Zambia, embracing influences from ancestral and modern practice of religion. Luame traverses the old and the new, charting an unusual balance between the two. Knitted in Silence tells the story of a young girl, Luame, caught up in the struggles of a family steeped in rivalry, greed, and occultism. Her uncle Tobias employs dark powers to try and destroy the child when he discovers that Luame has spiritual powers so that he can appropriate her powers for his own sinister uses. She is struck by a mysterious impediment which places her in a vulnerable space. Her life becomes a battleground between the forces of good and evil. Now, that's a very brave topic to launch out with. But I mean, I think you're used to tackling hard subject matters and flying in the face of what is taboo. But when we're looking at Luame's story, she's kind of answering back all of the experiences that you've had helping women since A Song in the Night. There was something that you said when we spoke about this earlier about her being the character actually being knitted together. Tell us a little bit about Luame and why she was so important for you, especially because A Song in the Night was all about you, but Luame is all about the women that you've met and helped as a result of A Song in the Night.
Thank you. The result of A Song in the Night was that I became the face of widowhood. I had so many, I didn't realize how much pain there was in this world. People go through so much pain, and mostly they do not have where to take their pain. And I was there, and people reached out to me, and I had all sorts of sad experiences. And I should mention that it's not only women that came to me for comfort, even men. You know, people would phone even in the middle of the night to just hear a friendly voice, you know, to just get some comfort. At some point, many of my female friends were calling me senior widow. It was like I'd been given this mission work, and I carried it. I didn't run away from it. I carried it, and as much as I could, I gave people support and encouragement as much as they needed. Now, Lueme, I would describe her as a composite character made up of the many people that I have met, the many people whose stories I have read, both young and old. I guess that's why it's knitted in silence. I just knitted everything together and came out with Lueme. Knitted in Silence is a book that has several strands, and the many strands of it meet somewhere where Lueme is. She starts out from childhood, and there are issues in childhood. People think that children do not have issues, they do. And then, she ends up as a grown person, but still with issues. But I'm so happy that in the end, when the story ends, Lueme is a balanced character. She's a happy character. Life has panned out well, but oh my goodness, to get there, she had to walk through hell. She walked on the thorns, she walked through fire, she walked through water, and my very keen desire is for people, because I know that Africans are very spiritual. That's one of the sub-themes of the book. You know, this dichotomy between ancestral beliefs and our Christian beliefs. We have debated whether the two can go together, and we have one camp which insists that if you are a Christian, you must have nothing to do with your ancestors, and they forget that your ancestors include even your grandmother. So throw away your grandmother as well, because we are a Christian. And it is my hope that people will read this book and try and get educated on how Africans can find that balance. Lueme found that balance. She struggled and struggled a lot, but she found that balance. I really sincerely hope that women especially can learn something from this account, because also in Lueme's life, there are other characters who make up her life story. The one that I particularly love is a character called Tione. Tione is a tragic character. She's not at the center of the story, but a life story, her experiences, social experiences, psychological makeup is one that touches me very deeply. And I know that African women are going to relate with this character a great deal. We have something called, it's a ritual, it's called Mashawe. I know that many people are aware of it. And across Africa, it's not just Zambia, across Africa. Mashawe is spiritual possession. And spiritual possession is an experience where someone loses control over their life. We have found a way in Africa to deal with that. We do not go to the psychiatrist like our friends in the West do, but we have a monthly cycle. When the moon is up, when the moon is in a certain position, we have a ritual of the Mashale dance, where these people, the afflicted women especially, go and get some treatment. When I say treatment, I'm not talking about tablets. I'm talking about the ritualistic experience that expunges the pain from their guts. And when they come out of that ritualistic experience, they are new again. They've been washed, they've been refreshed, much the same way that Christians do when you go for baptism and you are dunked under water and you come out a new person. You are no longer the old, but the new. Our Africanism is very much intertwined with our beliefs as Christians. I do not see any conflict, although people like to pretend that there's a conflict. I do not see any conflict. God was God in Africa even before the Western people arrived in this continent. And we had the issues, we knew how to deal with those issues. We still have issues and we know how to deal with those issues. But what is happening now is that we are in denial and we want to pretend that we never existed before the colonialists came, but we did exist. So maybe it's time that we started to revisit ourselves, revisit the African psyche. The African psyche is very powerful. It kept us for centuries and centuries, and this is no time to throw it out. Sometimes when I talk about this, I'm afraid that I'll be excommunicated from church, but I think this is a conversation that we need to have, as Africans. We need to have this conversation. If Luweme could manage it with all the disasters that happened to her, why can we not approach this? No, we need to confront this. And I believe somewhere in there lies part of the answer for women not having to carry too much burdens alone, which is what happens in Zambia. I don't know about other countries, but in Zambia, we have very frightening statistics of suicide. Women killing themselves because they're failing to cope. Unfortunately, now it has even turned to young people. They also kill themselves because they're failing to cope. The human psyche is very powerful. I think it needs more attention. We pay too much attention to our bodily needs, but we are not paying attention to our psyche. So it's time for us now to start these conversations and confront these issues with all openness, with total openness.
Yes, it's important for the conversation to be had, and for people to be open to the conversation, because even if we agree to disagree, we must hear each other out. And as you said, there is a need to find some kind of balance, even if balance looks different, to different people having the conversation. And so it's very, very important, very interesting that you raise this issue of women being trapped in these circumstances. And also very interesting, the highlight you gave of the side character, Tony, who, as you said, is tragic in comparison to Luame, who finds some level of redemption and some level of being able to move past her issues. And what that means, because as you said, there are many sub-themes, the one being spirituality, but also the family dynamic that then plays into that from a patriarchal structure. And basically just how I think some people who have evil intentions can create a situation of exploitation, and a situation that doesn't always or set up a person to walk out of a darkness or to walk out of a confinement into true liberty and freedom. So very, very interesting there, and very, very much not even the tip of the iceberg when it comes to everything that's in this book, because we start from the very beginning and get-go of Luami's story all the way through. And the story is told in a way where we want her to win. You are quite open about both sides of the spiritual dichotomy that you've spoken about. So I noticed that there was scripture in the book, there were scenes, very vivid church scenes and moments that were very powerful in the book. But you also did not deny this other side that we're talking about that's very real and that people actually very much experience, but we either choose to condemn or ignore. And one of the cries of your heart was definitely around women becoming free, not only from that condemnation, but you described it as walking out of the darkness, which I found very, very interesting. So unfortunately, we're running out of time, and Knitted in Silence is a book that needs its own entire conversation to go through. But we haven't given too much away. So if this has piqued your interest and what Norah said has piqued your interest, please definitely grab a copy of that book. So Norah, where can people get Knitted in Silence if they want to actually explore the journey for themselves and read the book?
We are right now working on getting the book to be available for online purchase. Very soon we should be announcing that. But for now, people would have to contact me, although I have made my children the managers of the book, so they manage the distribution of the book. So people can contact me, get in touch with me. I'm on Facebook, Norah Mumba on Facebook. We'll make sure that they get access to the book. I really would love that people should read this book and open up conversations. Whenever somebody has bought a book and started reading, they immediately, we have these conversations going where some of them are asking, but this, how this work out? And I said, but that's why you are reading the book. But the point is that it is doing something to them. It is keeping them really occupied, and they have favorite characters, and they have favorite anti-heroes. And generally people are having, it's an experience, let me put it that way. Reading Knitted in Silence is an experience that everybody needs to go through.
And I mean, I think it's definitely a challenging experience, no matter what your views on many of the issues that the book touches on, because while spirituality is a strong thread there, family dynamics are just as important. Love stories are just as important in the book, and just and personal development. And so it's good to challenge our thinking on those things and to explore. Otherwise we'll never really know our own minds. So it's been a pleasure talking to you, Norah. And again, for those of you who are curious about the book and want to know more, Norah herself is on Facebook. And if you look up Knitted in Silence on Facebook, you'll be able to get to her Facebook page where you can follow her. You can make a request and keep track about when the book will be available on Amazon. Or alternatively, get a runner to get it up to you from Zambia. If you're in the African region, it's definitely possible. I had mine couriered a couple of days ago, so it is possible. You should read it to stretch your mind. So thank you very much, Norah, for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure talking with you about women and about your song in the night, which has now become a chorus in Knitted in Silence. And we look forward to more offerings from you. To all of our viewers, thank you, Norah. So to all of our viewers, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you again, same time next week with another African female storyteller. Until then, stay warm and stay safe.